This is our, what is it called? Our afterwards conversation, this great stage of fools. I'm Barry, I use he, him, his, and I'll let you folks introduce your extraordinary selves.
Hi, my name is Melissa. I'm playing Regan in this show.
My name is Ashley Philza. I play Goneril.
Brent Spencer playing Gloucester.
I'm Jill Anderson. I'm the director.
I'm Fred Vogel, King of France and others.
Ryan Kaplan, I play Kent.
Tom Jarrett, I was Cornwall.
Chris Hernandez, stage manager.
Genius, love it. As we think about comments or questions that may come up for you all to bring into the group, I'd love to invite you to think about what's resonating, what's sticking with you from tonight's performance, what was arresting, what was memorable, awesome, rad, and try to keep our questions and comments in that sort of tenor, that sort of love thing. I'm Barry, I'm exhausted, and y'all, for everyone here, I'd love to hear about, what drew you to Lear, what still draws you to Lear every time you perform it, what draws you in about this play?
For me, the challenges. I mean, it's such a massive play, and so many challenging moments. I mean, for me, the fake suicide is kind of fundamentally comic in some way, and it's hard to. I had a lot of help from a good director, but it was hard to think of it as somebody's going to laugh. I mean, when all he does is fall on the floor. But from Susan and from Jill, got good direction for trying to make that work. But so many challenges in this. I mean, for Lear too. How many howls does he have? To act those moments. So many acting challenges. I keep thinking, of course, Shakespeare knew his company, and so he was probably setting impossible challenges for each of these actors in some way or the other. What a devil.
What a devil.
I mean, it's reductive to say that I'm a sucker for a good tragedy. That's such a cliche way to say it, but I am. And I love Shakespeare. For me, this is the first time I've ever gotten to play in Shakespeare. I've done one reading of a Shakespeare play once before, but never any produced Shakespeare. So for me, I was just chomping at the bit. I love this language. I love how he writes characters that are sometimes just over and above, a little larger than life than you would think maybe that they should be even, but once you delve into the language, it's just so beautiful and so amazing. I think I used the word languish in the language the other day with you, that I'm just getting to languish in this Shakespearean world, in the language itself, in the characters, and it's delightful.
I think what I love about this play is, all of Shakespeare's stuff is really complex, but I think the characters are ultra complex and rich within this play. At face value, I think it could be really easy to fall into a trap of thinking, oh, we have our good guys and our bad guys, and that line is super blurred in this play. Even the protagonist does some really messed up shit. Says some really messed up things. And even there are times with villains, with Edmund, I'm born into this world, why can't I rise above? He walks on stage with a ton of injustices laid before him. I think similar even with Goneril and Regan, especially with Goneril, there's some really horrid things that Lear says and does. The kindest thing he says about her the whole play is, Goneril, our eldest born, speak first. That's it. And the rest of the play is nothing but names and curses and, Yeah, I think it's just the complete richness of characters, and as an audience member, not just from within inside it, but watching, you're just, I love the contradictions that you're like, oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's horrible. Oh, it's in the same person. Yeah, that's what I love about the play. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess from a directorial standpoint, the thing I find most interesting about this is like what lies beyond ego. When King Lear's potency as the pinnacle human being of power in this universe is pulled out from under him incrementally, then what's left? He's stripped of his self-identity, and then has to actually grapple with thoughts of what is life like without all of these protective things around me. I think one of the most poignant bits of text is when he says the prayer in the storm, I'll pray and then I'll sleep. And he says, you know, how do people with nothing handle a storm like this, the exposure of it? You know, the stripping down of, again, Edgar, going from being the golden child of an aristocratic family to being a homeless, mad beggar in the storm, literally naked, stripped of even his clothing. And then what kind of insights does that bring? Some of his two soliloquies are almost always cut. You know, people want a 2-hour-long show. Sorry, I didn't go that route. But that stuff always goes by the wayside. But that's some of the most poignant, plaintive kernels of incredible truth. His monologue in which he says, basically, I am at the worst. I can't get any lower. And in that, there is freedom. He says, but at the lowest, there's still hope, esperance. I live not in fear. I'm not flattered. This is a reality. It's like the adversity has brought him face to face with the fundamental, and that's so profound, you know. Anyway, those are the things that really strike me about it.
For me, I think Nightly, what draws me back is like the intensity of the show. I think what's interesting to see from a technical, I mean, I sit in a booth and I watch a screen the whole time, and with the nature of our stage, and it's really cool. But the intensity of the show is such that I have a hard time getting excited for scenes. Like we move on with the show goes on, but like there's a darkness even when just reading along in the script that's like I can kind of feel this weight, and like I'm sure we could ask our sound engineer Mindy. There, like I take like deep breaths throughout the show because there is as scenes approach, or there might be a scene change or a cue that's called, and it just kind of like is a feeling more than like me experiencing it, but it's the weight of what's coming next. It's heavy, and so I think that speaks to the craft that we've built. I mean, if that is making it through a big black curtain and up through a light board, then I think we've done a really impressive job at building something here. So, my condolences, I guess. Who has to live it on stage, right?
There's a lot of humor too, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, yeah.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Fred Vogel.
What?
Speak.
Me?
Yes.
This show and Shakespeare in general is just inherently compelling to me. Like everybody has said beforehand, it's just he weaves this very complex tapestry. For me, with this show in particular, it's fun seeing all the dominoes get set up every night, and the minute that Cordelia says nothing, you just watch all these dominoes fall, and it's beautiful and so cathartic. Well, not cathartic, but you know, it's
Right.
just so compelling, and I think that speaks to Jill's direction and all the technical work, and especially my fellow actors here.
Everybody said essentially what I would, but I guess I'll zero in on kind of what some of the pieces coming together. So what it speaks to me is how just elemental it is. It really zeroes in on what is human and what it is to be human and the human condition. And you know, and some of what Jill was talking about, stripping things down to their basic elements, where he's, you know, Lear's literally out there in the elements. But you know, to go along with what Ashley said, yes, what always amazed me about Shakespeare, and probably the reason we're still doing it 400 years later, as opposed to a lot of his contemporaries, is how the characters stand up to, you know, contemporary analysis. They're not one-dimensional. There's just so many different, you know, components there, and I think that on another side, as simple and basic and elemental as it is, I also like it because it's an epic. It's huge in scope. It's the closest thing to a true Greek tragedy in terms of just the extremities of human experience all are in this play, and yet you have these tiny, quiet little scenes like Lear's reunion with Cordelia, you know, that feel like they're happening on a, you know, little TV screen. I don't know. So yeah, it's the size of the thing, both in its hugeness and in its smallness, that I like.
Me? I live to count how many times the fool says coxcomb. In that one scene. No.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
No, I guess what really draws me back, and this is a little sappy and a little sentimental, sort of, I just love what everyone kind of does on stage. You know, better people and smarter people have said it, that I recognize every single one of these characters, minus the eye gouging and sword play, but no, literally, okay, apparently Fred's sword fights. No, I recognize all of these people. I've met all of these people. Some of them are in my family. You know, France. And I think that contributes to Ryan's point about the longevity of Shakespeare, is that these are people that are innately human, and we all know people who do things like Cornwall, who connive like him, who are steadfast and loyal as Kent, who slip into dementia and madness like Lear and lash out because things are suddenly scary. We all see these things. And it's really fascinating to see what everybody does on stage. In particular, the confrontation scene between Goneril, Regan, and Lear. I never feel like I know exactly how it's going to go. There are always little nuances and little new insults and injuries that go between everybody, and it's just fascinating to watch. And that's what gets me. So.
Shane played
Yes.
Edmund. Shane is here.
Shane Steiger, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry I was late.
Heroic effort this evening. Working through a lot of pain and persevering.
Yeah, Shane had an back injury yesterday, so
Stupid ice.
stupid ice, but
March.
he pulled it together, brought it tonight.
I don't know about that, but
What
I was
kid?
here. What was the question?
What are you? Well, yeah.
What draws you in? What draws you to this play?
Oh, well, you know, what I really like, of course, when I was offered the role of Edmund, which is, I guess, quintessentially the bad guy, the villain of the play. I didn't know much about Lear, read it, of course, after I got the part, which is a wise thing to do. And I realized that there's elements of good and evil in everybody in the show. nobody's all good, nobody's all evil. You know, some are obviously a little more selfish than others, but everybody has redeeming things and things that make you cringe that they do. And that's what's, I guess, the cool part about it that draws me in is finding those elements where you can explore both sides of that equation, the good and the evil in man. I try to do that with Edmund. It's a little difficult because he's mostly just a little bastard most of the time. But even him in his death scene is, you know, looking to try to make some sort of redemption when he sees the end is near. And even good people like Kent, who is quintessentially the good guy, is beating up on Oswald and throwing him around. And you know, and so everybody's got their moments where they're, you know, evil, I guess, and good. And that's, I think, you know, going back to what they're talking about, the endurance, how it is able to continue after hundreds of years, is the fact that the human qualities, the human nature is just so ripe and in it to explore those elements. And as an audience, you can pick and choose different moments where you like or don't like, or you just get involved with it, and that's what's really cool about it. Just seeing what everybody's objectives are, how they go after them, and that's what draws me in, I suppose.
Oswald deserved it though.
I love it. I love it. One more group question, you guys. I'm really fascinated. Our typical experience, at least in this community, around Shakespeare is expansive, huge scale, watching from a mile away,
From a parking lot.
larger than life performances, right? And we've talked a little bit about like what Ryan said about like the intimacy versus the hugeness of this. Jill, I've heard you speak about this heart-centered approach to it, but also the capaciousness, the outsized, like, roominess of this production, or the play. But then here we are in this really, really intimate space. Kind of feels like a old school small Elizabethan theater, maybe, as if that were intentional or something. But what is it like doing Lear here, doing Lear in this space, this close to the audience?
This was a strange dichotomy because it feels like a little black box theater. And yet, and so that would lead the performer to think, oh, I can really like be tiny in here. And you can to a degree if you've got consonants with, you know, if you're enunciating, you can scale it down. But the emotions and the size of the stakes in this story are so colossal that if you don't rise to fill that size, things feel flaccid. The storytelling feels limp and ineffectual. Like every moment, every objective, everything that the performer is going after has to be pounced on with ferocity. And I think that that's a deceptive thing about this space. You think that you can do something kind of subtly. Not that there's no place for subtlety here, there can be. But as far as going after what the character is going after, that's non-negotiable. It has to be crystal clear and gone after, you know, with intention and focus. So that's something that I found. I assumed that we could do less in the space, but in fact, that is not the case. Diction has to be crystal clear, intentions have to be committed to, with a kamikaze-like dedication to put the story across, despite the smallness of the space. That's what I've found as director, you know.
I love it because it feels like there's nothing wasted. That while still being full and large and voraciously going after whatever your character is going after. That I love that somebody can see my lip twitch. I love that somebody, not, it doesn't matter what stage I'm on. You want to be alive in every single moment. Like that's not, but I love that it's like you're gonna watch my finger, like tap here, shake here. Like that's really exciting. That's a really just like surface level answer, but I love it. I love that how close everyone is.
So for my character would be the same in a different space. So much of what Edmund does is delivered directly to the audience, to pull them into the plot, to let them know what the wheels in his mind are spinning and conceiving and conjuring, and having the audience a few feet away. It's just like, come along with me for this ride. We're going on this together, and I don't know. Some people look away, which is fun. Then you're kind of getting to them, but that's good. I think it's a guilty pleasure to experience that with each character that close, and of course the sword fights gotta pick up a lot more enthusiasm and excitement when they're happening in your lap, basically.
That's a little intense. I sat there last night where he's singing, and I was like, oh, that's what that feels like.
I have seen many feet jerk backs. Yep.
It's a play so driven by power and evil that, I just wonder, shaking that off. In other words, it seems so much that so many of the characters are not paying attention to each other. I mean, they're all in it for themselves. And yet, it's an ensemble, so it's like how that relationship, or those relationships must feel rough on stage, I guess. Or, how do you, maintain your evil motivation while interacting with each other, And it's not everyone, but it's pretty much everybody. I mean, it's, the fool maybe, but, otherwise, like, power is driving everyone and alienating everyone from each other.
Well, speaking as one of the few who gets to play a character who's not quite as selfish or power driven, power mad or driven, what really has surprised me about working on it this time is how many moments of warmth we were able to find, or it just kind of started to happen naturally. Just relationships and moments of connection. I know, again, for a lot of the folks up here, it's nothing but coldness and distance and status and all these different things that they're. But it was so great to kind of explore a relationship with Cordelia that just isn't overtly in the text, but it started to come out on stage, and with the Fool, and certainly with Lear, and even with Gloucester, and all these just different moments of like people as life rafts trying to just hold on to them in this storm of selfishness, and because you're right, I think it's really the engine of the play is like, oh, we're dividing up the kingdom. Oh, well, then we're just going to kill each other over it for the rest of the next 3 hours. And anyway, so for me, it's really cool to see that there is a kind of a beating heart to the thing, despite all this other stuff.
Yeah, I've heard several people who have come to see this production, who've seen Lear in the past, say that this is the first time a lot of those things are clicking for them. For me, I mean, obviously I'm coming at it from a perspective of one of the characters that is very easily, oh, she's the evil sister, right? She's the evil middle sister. I think for me, there's a couple of things to that. From a technical standpoint, throughout the rehearsal process, you learn which moments you have to like step away for a minute before you go on stage, or step away for a minute after you come off stage. there's at least one or two of those for me that I'm like, I need a minute before I can go out there and do that, you know? But then from a more psychological and emotional standpoint, I think, you know, we talk a lot about evil and power and manipulation and all of these things that the play is about, which it certainly is. But what I've found delving into all the family dynamics is that for me, it's a play about trauma.
Yeah.
And I think when I view it through that lens, it allows me to connect more to the humanness of everything, which I think allows you to step in and out of even those moments where the action of the play is horrendous, you know, because certainly it's Lear, there's a lot of that. But I think psychologically it allows you to step into that and step away from it in a less jarring way if you can empathize a little bit with not the action being taken necessarily, but where the wound is coming from ultimately, that the root of everything, how it's growing into these horrendous actions. That's a little bit of a woo-woo answer, but I think if you can focus in that way as an actor, it helps a lot to be able to walk off stage and someone you're yelling at or gouging an eyeball out or whatever it is and just be okay, you know, moving on to the next thing.
To your empathy point, I think it's really interesting that Lear starts with what, for any child, would probably be a relatively traumatic experience of having to qualify and quantify and profess publicly your love for a parent in order to gain material wealth. That is really messed up from square one.
And you see a theme as well that no matter what the sisters say, Lear has already decided, you know, I mean, when he calls Cordelia forward, it's what can you say to gain a third more opulent than your sisters? It's like, yep, whatever we were gonna say, he was gonna do what he was gonna do.
We all see the big green.
Two of my favorite moments in that sequence are when he makes her turn around and talk to the audience like a show dog and jump through the hoop, this demeaning gesture, which came about naturally in a rehearsal. And when Regan finished and he's like, get the fuck out of there now, my sweetheart. You know, it's like just in the body language we see very clearly, you know, where is
Let's not forget what my dad does to me in the first 5 seconds of the
Exactly.
It's true, it's so awkward.
it is so awkward.
talking about my mom right in the street guy.
I was not expecting you to say
Hello, Matthew Fisher, Edgar. Welcome, Edgar. Yeah.
Matthew has a little more de-Edgarifying.
Showering necessary.
It's a good routine to get.
You look so clean, Matthew.
Thank you.
Oh,
Costume
I'm not
comes
used
off
to
well.
that.
Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I also desperately want to hear what draws you in, Matthew, about this play, and then maybe move on to a final question before we retire for the evening.
Sure. What draws me into this play is so kind of a part of the season. This is about like embracing the madness, and I think a lot about this play is just embracing different levels of emotional turmoil. You know, we see that in a foil with King Lear. We see that in a foil with Kent. Even the Fool has its own madness, and Goneril and Regan. And I think that's what really draws me in, is we get to see like the real, like the psycho journey that they all are going through. I mean, even Cordelia to an extent, because there's a lot going on with Cordelia, but she's like the most poised about it. And that's also fascinating to see, because that in itself is representing a type of, you know, psychology that we see in society, especially like in tragic moments.
Yes, nice, exactly. And I want to build off what Jill did, offering up her one of her favorite moments, most interesting moments. This should maybe be a moment that you're not a part of, artist. What fascinates you every time you hear it or see it? Can't take your eyes off it. Beautiful, challenging.
I have one that has been with me for 50 years, probably. Is that possible? Yeah, it is, and it's not my moment. But to me, it's central to the play. In a play that's covered over so much with dissembling different layers of identity, lies, misrepresentations. And for me, the line that echoes, and I haven't even chosen, it's just haunted my life, is Cordelia in that opening saying, I know you, what you are. That piercing truth has kind of informed my life. And I never measure up, but it's the ideal in there for me. And it comes to me in the oddest moments. I can hear Cordelia. Not just because of this play, but the performance, but because of reading it as an undergraduate so many years ago. I know you, what you are. I wish I had that kind of perception, you know.
It's a stunning line.
Yeah.
I know you, what you are.
Others?
I'm obsessed with the pool. Not Josh. I'll say it straight to the camera. No, when I first saw this play, that's the character I was immediately drawn to. And Josh does such a fantastic job. I love when he just sings. Like everything is so chaotic. The hey ho, the wind and the rain, and I'm sitting back there at my table, and whenever I hear it, it's a benchmark of like sweetness and clarity that I so desperately yearn for. So every night I hear it, I'm like, and also not something I ever perceived was this antagonistic thing between Goneril and the fool. I mean, obviously it's there in the text. You know, but what we've done with it has just been delightful. So, like, getting to walk on stage and, like, where's that whole shit? You know, things that we discovered as, a group are delightful. And then I love Ryan's, a lot of his just, you do such a good job, friend, of clear storytelling, and I just love when he's recounting, like, I'm in the stocks because Oswald was screaming, and everybody was like, that's just another one of my favorite parts that I look forward to every night. Yeah.
For me, it's like the little moments, like people pointed out, the little moments of warmth, like when Josh is trying to comfort him and he's singing. When Fred hears France and this is most strange. Like the compassion that comes out of it is just my favorite. Michael Trutnut even when he talks about when Kent asked was she moved to any, just like the care you hear in his voice. So like the little moments like that stick out at me. And conversely, so do lines like, "Oh, Goneril, you are not worth the dust that the roof belongs to." Like, I could literally sit here and tell you my favorite moments of each and every character. But no, it's just little tiny snippets, little tiny moments that just grab you out of nowhere.
I think what grabs me the most, and Jill honestly did a beautiful job of directing this scene, but it's where Edgar barely has anything to say, and he's listening to the king's madness, but in the madness there's true clarity. And there's so much that the king talks about, either in a metaphor or literally, mostly in a poetic metaphor, that just ring so true to you, like robes and furred gowns hide all.
Yeah.
Because that's saying in royalty, we can hide our misdeeds, but when we are stripped and bared, like King Lear is in that moment, nothing is hidden. All his faults and feelings are completely felt.
I guess I have two favorite things. One of them is the incredible images painted by Edgar to convince his father that they're on a cliff over the ocean. It's just transporting language, beautiful. And my other favorite thing is when the fool is talking to Kent in the stocks and basically says, you're a fool. You're doing a foolish thing. Why? What's foolish? You've tethered yourself to a man that's doomed. A wheel rolling down a hill is going to break your neck. Attach yourself to somebody going uphill. And then turns right around on a dime and says the most phenomenal poem about how I will stay. The person that follows just for form is going to leave you in the storm, but I will stay. And saying that, fully knowing that he's tethered himself to the wheel rolling down the hill.
We're both fools, but we know it.
Yeah. And that's not going to change our loyalty, our devotion to the king. It's just beautiful.
I'll just quickly say, I mean, it was already mentioned, but yeah, the scene of Edgar saving Gloucester's life has always stuck with me. That's one that kind of like Brent goes back to when I first read the thing. It was just a revelation to me. Like, as I was reading, I'm like, am I understanding this correctly? Like this, it's so darkly comic, but also just the most beautiful thing. He's, I mean, for a way to help somebody get through depression, for a way to deal with their grief. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's the right approach. Like, you know, to just say like, look at what happened. You fell from a cliff and you're alive. Clearly the gods want you to live. Just, I don't know, just mind blowing to me. It is the moment, the compassion and the love, and despite them both being in this situation because of Gloucester trusting the wrong son and all these different things. Anyway, yeah.
I feel like I could talk for 3 hours about everything that I love. I won't. I think as an actor, when you are fortunate enough to get a group like this that is operating, how do I say this? Operating so supportively behind the scenes and at such a high level on stage, when you can look around and just be baffled by everyone's work around you. There's just too much. Those are the experiences that grow you the most and that stick with you in a different way. I think for me, the moment that will probably haunt me from this whole experience actually was Ryan. There was one night that Lear wasn't here. Thomas, who played Lear, wasn't here, and we were just trying to stage the ending. And I was literally the Lear body. So I lived my dream of playing Lear. But I remember just sitting down, and I was just like, I can be a body, right, if we need somebody just to stage it.
This was a rehearsal.
This was a rehearsal. Oh, yeah. I didn't actually live my dream of playing Lear. And Ryan just sat down next to me in this moment that is so intimate. I felt like I was this intruder all of a sudden on this beautiful, intimate moment. And I just felt, he just dove in, and I was there just being a body, and I was like, oh, this moment will probably live with me for the rest of my life. You have that out of body where you're like, yep, that's a thing that's happening right now. And just grieving over this body and feeling another actor grieving with you over this body and also over the condition of who Lear is. I feel like I got this 30-second taste of who Lear is and who that relationship to Cordelia, to Kent, and it was so visceral in that moment. And I think that was the moment that I just knew, I have to step up my game. These people in this room with me right now, So that's kind of a weird one, but that's gonna stick with me, I think, forever. So thanks for that, Ryan.
I just remember when we, that was like we hadn't even spoken yet.
We hadn't died in your arms.
So then you'll just kind of hold on and listen. I'm like, hi, I'm Ryan, by the way.
And then I died in his lap, and it was great.
TG had something to say.
Oh no, I had the same moment with Ryan of like, oh, we're not playing. Okay. Like he walks in, he's like, I've been doing a little bit of accent work, and drops into that, and we're just like,
Yeah.
I need to work.
Yeah, Ryan is just like so natural. So natural.
Everyone bow down in supplication.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to make it a thing.
I also have a moment that's the same right on. I feel like I'm hopping in on the trend here, but this was when we said pick a moment, this was my moment too. It's the very end with Kent when he says, my master calls me.
Oh,
I must not say.
I have like just from a technical perspective, I have a light cue that has to happen there, and I have 2 red flags in my book to remind myself to take that light cue. Because I watch and I'm wrapped in it, and it's such a like, I must not say no, and I take a light cue.
You're like,
yeah, no, but same. I just like that was my moment.
Shane, do you have a favorite part of the show?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really get to experience much of the show with everybody else. I'm kind of off in my own little world, but I like all the acts of courage that I see. I think that's probably my favorite part. Cordelia obviously has her moments where she stands up to Lear despite being put out in front of everybody. Gloucester has his moment where he's, going out into the storm to find Lear, even though he knows it's going to cost him his life, possibly, more than likely, especially with me as his son. Kent, stands up to the king, gets, exiled, and yet still turns around and comes back. Even Edgar takes his moment where he's courageous, and that's what I like. Those moments where characters see the right and the wrong, and they choose the right, and they do it anyway, even though they know the path that it's heading towards is probably disaster, and
Even
they still
Edmund
do
on
it
his
anyway.
deathbed.
Yeah, tries to
Does
do
the right thing. Yeah.
Well, he said pick one that's not you, so.
I don't think we've heard from.
Yeah, we're friends.
Well, again, going off what Melissa said, I could list everything in chronological order, tell you why it's brilliant. And I'm cheating with this one a little bit, but I've always been struck with how forgiveness plays into the latter half of the show. Mm-hmm. All these characters do such horrible things to each other, and yet at the end, the moment I'm picking is when Cordelia forgives Lear. Mm-hmm. It really sticks with me every night, and I'm so privileged to be a part of that scene. Again, that's why I'm cheating a little bit, but I'm in the background just nodding my head. So.
You have a hard job. You interject at important points. But I mean, like, you really keep the mood going with these 2 brilliant actors, and
and it just really speaks to the human condition. I think everybody has at least one family member that they have a complicated relationship with, and I think forgiveness plays into healing some of those relationships, no matter how fraught they might be. And again, Ryan is very brilliant, and that's but I would also like to point out that I'm just awestruck with what Thomas and Delaney are doing with that scene every scene.
They're stunning.
I'm holding back tears every time we do it, and
I know we're out of time. I also just want to say, Chris has you mentioned the cues, and the timing of it is you're as much an actor in the show as anybody.
We're out of time. We are.
With all of the storm things and everything, and the cues always are just spot on, and it's so cool to feel like we know that we're gonna
Good
transition into the next thing smoothly because of that.
Yeah, it's like not even a concern. How many cubes do you have?
It's a lot.
It's a fair amount of views. Thank you, Bill Kirby. Yeah. It's like we actually have a number, like it's like 400 and something sound cues.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, something like cues.
An insane amount is the
Yeah.
bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The storm sequence has like, I think 40, just like in like 2 pages. It's awesome. It shows, it's beautiful on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, you guys, we are at time, but I want to thank you so very much for spending it with us here. And this has been, what did I call this? This great stage of fools.
Nice.
Hilarious. We still have tickets if y'all.
Fool boy. Just don't call me fool boy.
We still have tickets, mostly on the final weekend. www.bluebarn.org. Round of applause for our artist and audience tonight. Mutual applause. Love it. Thank you.